Once upon a time in the village of Gogoro, there was a forbidden river that was left abandoned by the villagers. The stories of an evil mermaid had been told for many generations to the villagers, especially the men, to beware of the river and never go there. The elders of the village told the people of the village that anyone who ever went to the village would never come out again, and everyone in the village feared and avoided the river except a man called Segun. He was a brave and bold man who never cared about anything the villagers said, and he had been sneaking to the forbidden river to fish since he started his fishing business. The market day was the following morning, and Segun nonchalantly, like he used to, packed his fishing net and went to the forbidden river. As he started fishing, his fishing hook caught something very heavy. Segun was very excited, and as he pulled upwards, the surface of the water started to glow yellow and brighter. He didn't know what he was pulling, but he kept pulling to the surface. Segun was shocked when he saw a glowing mermaid unconsciously hooked by his fishing strings as he dragged her to the river, studying her body. The mermaid suddenly opened her eyes and pulled Segun down with her deep into the river, and in a matter of seconds he was in a cave with shallow water and airspace. "After all these centuries I have finally gotten a man," the golden mermaid said as she moved close to Segun, caressing his body. Segun begged the mermaid to let him go, but she refused. "I will make you my husband," the mermaid said, and every night she would lay with Segun. One day when the mermaid wasn't around, Segun tried to swim out of the cave, and when he managed to get to the surface, he weakly ran to the village. Everyone was surprised to see Segun after months of being missing. When he returned, he told them his story and what the golden mermaid had done to him. After a few days, when Segun thought everything was over, the golden mermaid was already pregnant, and she needed Segun to be with her when she wanted to give birth. The golden mermaid then swam to the shore of the river and started singing a song which got to Segun where he was. The song pulled him to the river, and with Segun by her side, she gave birth to a child, a girl. A villager saw Segun being pulled mysteriously and told the other villagers, who noticed Segun was missing again, and they all ran to the forbidden river. They saw the golden mermaid with Segun, and they ran towards the mermaid and stabbed her. Segun was shouting, telling them to stop, but the villagers already killed the golden mermaid. The baby in Segun's hands was crying loudly. The villagers demanded the mermaid's baby must also be killed. Segun refused to give the baby, and the villagers still insisted. Then he managed to escape, and Segun ran away from the village with his baby in his hands. Segun went to another village where he worked tirelessly to help his baby, and he named her Damaris, which means mother's death. Damaris grew up to be a strong, beautiful lady, unaware of her past. Segun only told her mother had died during childbirth. One fateful morning, as Damaris was walking down from a hill, she heard a strange noise of drums and celebration from a distance. It sounded very newly strange and appealing to her for some reason, so she decided to follow the sound. She followed the sound and got to a very large river where she saw some of the villagers swimming. Damaris could now hear the drumming and celebration noise louder, but couldn't see any sign of people celebrating. She entered the water and started swimming. Suddenly the noise and song became louder and clearer. It was from the water, under the water. Damaris was shocked, and she looked at the villagers swimming around the river. "Good evening, people. Can you hear the song from underneath?" But they only cast sarcastic glances at her. A girl named Mabaro swam towards her. "Hello, which sound are you talking about?" she asked Damaris, who also moved towards her. "I'm hearing some music from under the water. Don't tell me you can't hear it. It sounds very..." Before Damaris could finish her speech, Mabaro suddenly vanished, pulled with incredible speed down under the water. Damaris, in shock, quickly followed. As Damaris swam downward, she saw two big mermen pulling Mabaro, who was choking and gasping in the water, away. Damaris swam with great speed following them, and the mermen turned around looking at her in amusement and disbelief after swimming down for a few minutes. She finally saw where the drumming was coming from. A mighty kingdom of mermaids and mermen were holding a festival, drumming and dancing. As the mer people saw the strange girl swimming towards them, following their warriors, they quickly swam towards her and grabbed her. They brought her to the front of the festival, and a very large merman with two tails swam boldly towards her. "Who are you? And how come you could get into our kingdom?" It was then that Damaris discovered she had been breathing underwater. "I don't know, I just followed the kidnapper merman," she replied, and this shocked the mer people more. "She can speak underwater. Impossible," they muttered to themselves. The two-tailed merman then swam towards her. "You're an abomination, and we don't like abominations." He turned to the mer people and shouted, "The gods have blessed us with 2 sacrifices today. It wouldn't be one girl like we are used to." And all the mer people shouted happily. They tied Damaris up and placed her with the unconscious Mabaro and pulled them both to the center of the river kingdom, where a giant fish with sharp teeth was sleeping with his mouth open. "You shall taste good to our gods," the two-tailed merman shouted, and they threw both Damaris and Mabaro into the mouth of the fish. as the fish swallowed both of them. Damaris' skin touched one of the fish's teeth and it broke her skin. As soon as Damari and Mabaro reached the stomach of the fish, her blood fell into the fish's stomach. The fish let out an extremely loud screech noise that immediately woke Mabaro, and he swam away from the mer people. This was unbelievable to the mer people because the fish hadn't moved from that spot for centuries. The great fish swam violently through the water because it is against its rules to taste a mermaid's blood. Still making an incredibly loud noise, it dashed through the river, and after a few seconds, it spat out Damari and Mabaro on the shores of an uninhabited jungle far away. As Damari and Mabaro landed on the shore, their hearts were pounding loudly, and they ran to the shores clinging tightly to each other. After a few minutes, Damari looked at Mabaro. "Are you okay? You were unconscious all the time we were at the mer people's kingdom." Mabaro looked at her in panic, still trying to catch her breath. "Mermaid's kingdom? What do you mean mermaids? Did we just come out from a very giant catfish?" she asked, and Damari nodded. "We have to leave this jungle and find a village to stay before night falls," Damari said, and they both went into the jungle. They walked for hours, each one clinging to the other in fear. They sang songs until they finally arrived on a walk path. As they walked a little further, they saw a signboard saying "Welcome to Gogoro Village." Damari and Mabaro quickly ran inside and talked with some of the elders of the village, telling them their story. They watched both of them skeptically and also told them the story of a mermaid they had slain years ago. The elders accepted them and gave both of them a room to pass the night. On the morning of the next day, Mabaro and Damari decided to continue on their journey, but first, they would have to take their baths since they could still smell the fish on their body. They asked around for water and the villagers directed them to the river where Damari was born unknown to her. They both went there with their pots, and as soon as Damari's hand touched the water, she transformed into a golden mermaid. Mabaro, watching her, screamed, and soon everyone in the river started screaming "Mermaid, oh mermaid, oh!" The village men were alerted, and Damari was still in shock looking at her scales. Mabaro kept staring at her in unbelief. When the village men arrived with their arrows, they shot at Damari, and Mabaro ran to stop them, but the arrow hit her in her arm. Damari shouted loudly, watching Mabaro fall to the floor. Damari was crawling to Mabaro when the village men of Gogoro carried her and Mabaro to the center of the village. They put Mabaro bleeding out beside Damari, and they surrounded her and started singing "Every mermaid must die." In Gogoro, every mermaid must die. Damari begged them to help her bleeding friend, and she explained how she didn't know how this happened to her, reminding the elders of her previous story. Then one of the elders approached her with a machete. "Where is your mother, young lady?" Damari told him her mom died during childbirth, and her dad raised her on his own in another village. "Is your dad a fisherman by any chance?" the old man asked, and Damari nodded in confirmation, pleading with them to save her bleeding friend Mabaro. Then the man shouted, "I killed your mother. You this evil mermaid, you are the daughter of Segun, right? The traitor who betrayed his own village." On hearing what the old man said, Damari stopped and looked at the man. "What did you say, Mr. Man?" Damari said, with a calm, angry, shaky voice, and the man responded, "I said I stabbed your mother with this same cutlass I will use to end you." Damari let out a scream so loud and powerful, Segun, who had been searching for Damari all over the village, heard it. The mer people of the river heard. "That's one of ours," the two-tailed king muttered, and suddenly water came out from the floor surrounding Damari and Mabaro, forming a large tornado. As the roaring wave of water surrounded them, the great fish came out, opening its mouth, and Damari carried Mabaro inside the fish, and the tornado destroyed everything in the village of Gogoro as the great fish swam away. Damari attended to Mabaro in the stomach of the fish as the great fish swam back to the kingdom of the mermaids. When the great fish arrived, all the mermen and the mermaid gathered in front of the fish, which opened its mouth as Damari swam out. They all looked at her in amusement. "She's of royal blood," they said to themselves, and the two-tailed merman swam out again. "You are of royalty, you are always welcome in our midst, but I sense danger flowing through veins," he said. Then Damari told him about the injured Mabaro, and he sent some mermaids to go nurse her wound. They then performed some findings to find out who Damari's parents were, and they discovered it was the outcast Queen of War, who was banished from the kingdom. Damari told them the story of her life growing up. Then it all clicked that she had both the blood of the land and the sea flowing in her. The two-tailed merman told her to call her father and tell him she was okay, but Damari didn't have any means of doing that. "I don't know how that works," Damari said, and all the mer people around her looked at her smiling. "You called everyone in the kingdom a few minutes ago that ability is rare for even queens, and now you can't call your father." The two-tailed merman said, smiling, Anytime you hum a melody from your heart, the family member or loved one you're thinking about will hear you and come to you. That's how it works, and that's how you've always done it, he said. A mermaid approached Damaris and the two-tailed merman as they were speaking. My king, the injured lady in the great fish will need to be treated at the surface. Our medicine is keeping her stable, but she can't eat our food. The two-tailed merman nodded to Damaris, and she went inside the great fish to see Mabaro, who was still shocked to witness everything that was happening. Oh my God, you are a mermaid, a golden one, Mabaro said, touching Damaris' tail, who smiled at her. I will be taking you home now, plus I have to see my dad. Then Damaris hummed, and the great fish closed its mouth, carrying them to the surface. Segun, on the other hand, ran to his previous village and saw that the whole village was destroyed, and some armed men still remaining, saw him and chased him back. See what your useless daughter has caused. You and your daughter will both die, they shouted as Segun ran back, assured his daughter was still alive. Suddenly he heard a familiar song which pulled him towards the river in his new village. There he met his daughter Damaris, Mabaro, and the mighty fish. Segun ran towards Damaris and hugged her. Damaris told him everything he had kept from her, and she showed him her friend Mabaro and the great fish. Damaris told her father Segun to carry Mabaro to a clinic to help her and reassured him she would soon be back. As Segun carried Mabaro and went forward a few steps, a mob of angry men suddenly ran angrily towards Damaris and the great fish, and both quickly swam back into the river. Unknown to Damaris, her father and Mabaro had already been captured. The armed men from the village of Gogoro were now in an agreement with the new village after they saw what Damaris had done to their village. They wanted Damaris and her father Segun dead. They captured Segun in a prison, and after a few days of Mabaro getting well, they carried her to the shore and told her to call the fish and deliver a message to Damaris and the mer people that they have Damaris' father, and she must come out with all the mer people to save him. Mabaro told them she doesn't know anything about calling the great fish, but the men beat her mercilessly till Mabaro was crying in pain. The great fish suddenly jolted in the mermaid's kingdom and dashed out, swimming violently towards the surface, shocking everyone including Damaris, because no humans can connect with the great fish. As the men were still hitting Mabaro, the great fish jumped out of the water, biting and hitting the men away, and it swallowed Mabaro and swam back inside the river to the mermaid's kingdom. When it arrived, Damaris could tell Mabaro was inside, and she swam inside the fish to meet her. Mabaro, badly beaten, told Damaris what was going on and the war that's about to happen. Damaris was angry and she yelled, holding her head, which also pulled all the mer people closer to the fish. She swam out and told them the men on land had captured her father and they wanted war. Some of the mer people shouted in agreement for war, but the two-tailed reminded them of the tales of Damaris' mom, the queen of chaos and war, and advised Damaris to go alone peacefully the next day and prevent war. Damaris agreed, and when the following day arrived, she got prepared, and she and Mabaro in the great fish swam to the surface. As they arrived at the surface, they met the angry village men in thousands, and the man who slayed her mom holding Segun in his hands, staring at her menacingly. Then he spoke, we told you to bring the whole fish people, but you came alone. You disobeyed us, bringing a weak child and a dumb fish. Damaris swam forward, her tail turning into legs. As it touched the shore, I come in peace, mister. I'm sorry I ruined your village. I'm the one guilty and I am the one to be punished. Damaris said, Punish. She said, punished. You shall be put to death, little fish, but since you said punish, I shall punish you first by slitting your father's throat, he said as he cut Segun's throats, and Segun fell on the floor, bleeding out, looking into Damaris' eyes. Damaris looked at her father choking on the floor. Her golden eyes shone bright yellow, and she let out a scream that moved the whole river. The great fish roared with her, and her scream pulled all the mer people out of the river. A war broke out, and Damaris ran towards the man who killed her father. She used the wall of water to stop him from moving and marched towards him. She held his throat firmly. I should punish you by killing your wife and kids, but I guess I already did that. I shall perhaps give you a more painful death. Choking you would be mercy, Damaris said as she carried him towards the great fish, who removed his lower body, munching on him gladly. Marabo jumped out of the great fish, hiding behind it fearfully as some men came to attack Marabo. The great fish fought violently, being bruised by arrows and spear. Damaris fought, slaying men, and her anger only increased as she saw her dead father lying on the floor. The village men kept shooting arrows and recruiting more troops, but Damaris was filled with anger to retreat. All she wanted was all of them dead. The village men finally overpowered the great fish, and one of them caught Mabaro beside the great fish. Little traitor, he said, and he plunged a spear into her heart, which also penetrated the great fish. Both of them screamed loudly, which got to angry Damaris, fighting violently. She turned around and saw the last string of her earthly relationship stabbed. The great fish tried to fight, but he was already badly injured as Damaris ran towards them. When she got to Mabaro and held her in her arms, touching her fluffy hair, she died, and the great fish mourned its last breath. Tears filled Damaris' eyes. On a single day, she had lost all her family. When the two-tailed merman saw they weren't winning, he ordered his merpeople to retreat, and this angered Damaris even more. She turned and stood up, lifting her hands. A wave of mighty waters arose from the water following her, and as she dropped her hands, it crashed on her and all the village men on the shore, killing every single one of them. Since then, Damaris was never seen again. The river color changed into two unmixing color waters with different paths. Some people say it is the blood of the fallen village men and mermen, while some say it is the spirit of Damaris, the spirit of land and water still hovering inside the river. Hope you enjoyed our story. Please help us hit the save button, comment, and follow us for more videos like this. Also, if you would love a detailed ebook of this story, it would be available soon for free.